Imagine a website where your hard work as a maker shines and you don't have to bother with awkward sales conversations or cold emails to retailers that you're hoping will carry your products. That's the concept behind Faire, an online marketplace for makers to connect with retailers who are looking for new products. But does it actually live up to the hype? Well, that is what I'm going to cover in today's video, an honest review of Faire from the perspective of a maker. If this is your first time watching one of my videos, my name is Steph, my company is Wholesale, and I make things that smell nice. So candles, soap, perfume, shower steamers, lip balm, everything. And I've had my business for just over 2 years. So I am slowly growing, but seeing a lot of successes and a lot of failures, and I share as much of the behind the scenes as I can on this channel. Now, before I get into my review of Faire, I do just want to give a little bit of background on my experience with Wholesale. I started this business in August of 2021 with just soap. I had bars of soap. That was my only product. I had multiple fragrances, but that was all I was selling when I first launched. And by that first holiday season, I was already reaching out to stores about carrying my soap. I started with local stores because I felt like the main thing that I could pitch for myself was that it was made in the town that we were in. I'm in Milwaukee, so I was reaching out to like Milwaukee and the surrounding areas and be like, hey, if you want some Milwaukee made soap, I'm your girl. And I had right away, I had someone take me up on it, which was great. Like I sent out maybe 4 emails and one of them purchased. And then from there, I've mostly focused on those sort of like direct interactions, either people reaching out to me via like Instagram DMs or maybe an email and setting up those relationships that way. In the beginning, that was really all I could handle. It was just me, and for a while I was making everything out of my home, which is not large. So that was sort of max capacity for me to have a few really good, reliable relationships with local stores that I could like drive to drop off their orders. But as I grew, I quickly outgrew my house as a production space, and I rented a studio in order to make my products. But with that came the pressure of overhead, a lot more overhead in terms of rent. And so I knew that I needed like a more formalized approach to wholesale, and it couldn't just be sitting back and waiting for things to come to me. I needed to find a way to pursue new accounts, especially accounts outside of my regional market, because at some point you're just gonna reach capacity because people don't wanna be competing on product lines with their neighboring stores. And even more recently, I have hired my first employee. So again, I really need to make sure that I can consistently be making sales, and wholesale is a really great place to focus on that because it's larger orders, it's more reliable, you don't have to make the product until you know that it's already been paid for, and I really like that setup. So wholesale is an important focus for me and my business, but I find that I'm like constantly having to tweak the processes around wholesale so that it is efficient and continues to bring in new business. My background with Faire specifically is that I created an account actually like probably over a year ago, just because I was probably served like an Instagram ad most likely and was like, oh, well, I guess during a slow time in terms of like retail sales, it was like, well, I might as well do this. And I put very minimal effort into my profile. I uploaded most of my products, but not all of them. I probably didn't put a lot of effort into my like bio. And then I uploaded everything and I just let it sit. Like I probably got distracted by whatever next thing I was working on and kind of forgot about it. So much so that when I then wanted to look back into a Faire account, I sort of forgot that I had one already and had to like recreate it. But eventually I came back to it and realized a lot of the mistakes I had been making and got to work like updating those things and optimizing my profile. The main thing that changed my mind about going back to Faire is that I actually became a buyer myself. I moved into a new space at the beginning of this year, 2023. What year is it? Who knows? And the new space coincidentally has a retail storefront. I wasn't seeking out a retail space, but it's there, and it sort of changed my perspective on what I could be doing in the next 5 years, and considered opening for retail hours. But I also wanted to have products that complemented mine, because I just didn't have, I knew I was not gonna have the capacity to be constantly making new products to stock a store with. So I wanted to balance things out with other goods that I was purchasing at a wholesale price and then reselling. I have a reseller's certificate already, so it was really easy to get my account set up with Faire. And once I realized how easy it was and how enjoyable it was to shop on Faire from the buyer's perspective, it made me realize, oh, I really need to be taking advantage of this and creating a profile for my products that can potentially get me in front of the eyes of a bunch of buyers that I would not get in front of otherwise. A couple of things that I noticed as a buyer that I took note of before I started updating my own profile was that, one, how important the product photos were. And obviously we all know product photos are important. That's not like groundbreaking information, but it wasn't just like clear professional photos. The website actually recommends that you photograph your product on a plain white background, but I actually felt like the products I responded to best were lifestyle photos, like products that showed themselves in the environment that they were meant to be in, or like being used. I felt like a plain white background photo was like, I mean, it's fine, but it did not stand out to me the way that lifestyle photos did. There's some exceptions, obviously, depending on what the product is, but that was just something I noticed in terms of my own preferences as a buyer, and I wanted to make sure that I considered that for my own products. Another thing I noticed that it was a bummer to notice it, because I think it's a big thing that held me back, but the shops that had a lower order minimum were much easier for me to like convince myself to buy from. So you get to set your order minimum. There can be an opening order minimum and then a reorder minimum. But I originally set my opening order minimum at $200, I believe. And I think it's a big reason why I wasn't getting any sales. It's not the only reason, but it was definitely part of it, because I'm an unknown brand. And so for someone to spend $200 with me without a ton of social proof about my product and my brand, I think it was just like much harder to say yes to. Whereas when I was shopping for products, I was seeing stores that had $0 minimums and like $50 minimums. And both of those were so much easier, especially if they had like a wide range of products. It just made it so that like, it was easier to like say, yeah, I'm gonna order a few things from them and just hit that $50 minimum than like a store with 200. You have to be like really convinced that this is the exact right product for your audience. Aside from having a really high order minimum, I think some other mistakes that I was originally making on Faire included not allowing people to place orders when I was out of stock of an item. So this is a choice that you can like toggle on or off for all of your products. But with me and soap especially, soap has a 4-week cure time. And I felt like, well, I can't get an order from someone and then turn around and make a batch of soap and send it right off. Like I have to cure for 4 weeks. So I felt like I could only allow people to buy from what I already had because I wanted to send it out quickly. Well, you could maybe do that for soap, but I shouldn't have been doing that across the board. Like I have plenty of products that I can make them and ship them out in the same week, and it's not an issue. And I think that managing your inventory on Faire, again, this really depends on what you make, but I would much rather people always be able to order from me and then I make it once they've placed the order, as opposed to the other way around. So I think that it's also allows me to not waste as much product, because trying to guess how much of anything you should make and then hope that it all sells, just feels like a much like riskier and complicated formula than having someone place an order and just making it for them. Again, obviously this depends on what you make and how long it takes you to make them, but I think it might be good to have some product offerings that allow for that like quick turnover time, and you can always have them available. You never have to worry about being like sold out. Another thing I noticed that I've since definitely scaled back on is what the case size is for each of my products. Again, this will depend on what you make, but I don't ever want to just be selling one of any of my products because they need to be displayed together, like as a collection of items. If someone just buys like one of my shower steamers and puts it up on a shelf, it's just not going to look as good. I think it's, I don't know. If you're like making purses or something, that's different. But for me, I really wanted people to buy cases. And when I first started and I was listing my soaps, I originally was selling my soaps in a full batch, which is 15 bars. And I did that because I didn't want to have wasted product and I was still new. But 15 bars of something you don't even know if it's going to sell, again, for a small store, that's too much for them. They would much rather try like smaller case sizes. And so now I have case sizes of either like 4 or 6, and that's about it. My more expensive things, I do case sizes of 4, and my lower price items, I do cases of 6. And I find that people still order multiple cases. They can always buy more, but if you set your case size too high, I think it's just a deterrent. Another mistake I was making was not adding new products regularly. I was just letting it sit, and obviously their algorithm can sense when this is like a neglected shop. They don't want to promote stores that have no activity on them from the back end, because that person might not even be checking their emails about their Faire orders, and they don't want that experience for the buyers on the site. So you have to think of it that way. And they definitely reward you with adding new products on a regular basis. Now, this is really hard if you are a smaller business, because constantly adding new products is at the very least challenging, but at the most, it's like a bad business move because you're spreading yourself too thin across multiple products. So one thing that works for me that I think will help with this is that I have seasonal items. Now, I repeat my seasonal items. I'm not like reinventing the wheel every holiday season. I just use the same scents, but I can delete those products at the end of holiday season and then re-upload them the next. So it still looks like I'm regularly adding new products. And then I occasionally add a new year-round fragrance to like my candle line or my perfume line, and that has the same effect. Like, again, you don't want to be spreading yourself too thin, but try and strategically add new products because it just reminds Faire that you are an active seller and that you are invested in keeping your shop up to date. And then the last thing that I've changed is that I am more intentional about making collections. It's just an option that you can do on your profile, but it gathers your products together for different reasons, and you are rewarded for also making collections. I think it's also easier for buyers. If they're looking at like your long catalog of products, it might be harder for them to differentiate how they should group things together or what items sort of go together. And for me, it's not always obvious which fragrances are seasonal and which ones are not. So for me to make a collection of the holiday products is helpful to someone who's shopping for holiday scents, because they can just go to that collection instead of trying to like sort through all of my fragrances and piece out like which ones are holiday and which ones are fall. So that's another thing. So now that you know a little bit about my background with Faire and my overall experience in terms of maintaining my profile, I'm going to talk a little bit about the pros and cons I see as a maker who's working with Faire. One of the big pros is obviously just the exposure to stores and store owners that I otherwise would not have. Since I have updated my profile this like second time around, I've had orders from stores in Idaho, from Rhode Island, from New York. I'm in Milwaukee, so these aren't places that I could easily travel to and drop off samples with. These are stores that found me specifically because of my Faire profile, and that's the whole reason to do something like this. And for me, it is following through on that promise. It's exciting to me to be sending off products to other states. This is how I landed my first out-of-state customer. So on that front, huge pro, and I'm excited about just like who all it opens me up to in terms of my brand exposure. Another thing on like a logistics level is that I love the back end of how these orders are organized and how to process them and shipping and all of that. It's a really seamless experience, and it just centralizes everything. I'm hoping to eventually transition all of my like local wholesale customers over to Faire as well. And it just like, it easily shows you which orders are not fulfilled yet. In terms of shipping, the buyer pays for shipping. So there's no like secondary negotiation of like, okay, your order's ready, I need you to now pay for the FedEx estimate that I've gotten. I've done that once and it was such a headache, and this is all just like taken care of for you. So you still have to like input the box size and the weight and all of that, but then Faire handles the processing of paying for that shipping. So love that. I also really love the option for pre-orders. It's still very organized in the back end. There's like a little icon when something is a pre-order and isn't ready to ship out yet. And for me, especially with the holiday season, I love that I now know exactly how many of each product I have to make before I even think about what I want to have on hand for retail orders. I have like a dedicated number in terms of like figuring out how much fragrance oil to order, or wax, or any of that to get ready for holiday season is really great. I don't know if it's something that's going to be super utilized outside of the holiday season, but for right now, I already have like 3 pre-orders, and I love that. I have seen customers who place their current order for like fall stuff and then immediately after place a pre-order for holiday things, and it's very exciting. And again, like as someone who's trying to get a handle on how much of anything to make, it's so helpful and informative, and yeah, I really love that functionality. Now we'll move on to the cons of working with Faire, starting with the largest you can probably guess. The commission is insane. It's a lot. I'm definitely going to have to figure out how to assess down the road if it's worth it. Right now, I am thinking of it as advertising dollars in terms of like the profit that I'm losing out on, because again, like I said, I'm now working with stores who would not have found me otherwise. So I'm like reverse engineering this like lost profit as advertising money. It might turn out that as I analyze the data a little bit more, maybe it's not worth it for me, but right now that's part of the experiment. Their commission is specifically 15% on every order. I know, it's a lot. And on an opening order, which is a store's first order with you, there is also, on top of the 15%, there is a $10 flat fee for the first order that a store makes with you. Now, obviously on the reorders, if you create a good relationship with that store and they keep ordering from you, it's just the 15%. But considering I've knocked down my minimum order to $50, that $10 flat fee, I've had orders come in where I've calculated my profit and it's like $8. And $8 does not cover the labor for just boxing up the product and taking it to the post office, let alone making the products. So again, it's kind of a gut punch in the beginning, and it's definitely something to get used to. And it might turn out down the road that I decide it's not worth it if I'm getting enough sales on my own. But right now, again, I'm treating it as kind of an experiment, seeing what happens. I'm sure that Faire has done a ton of research on the most percentage they can take without it like harming people enough that they leave the site. So I'm gonna trust in the process, see what happens. The main exception to this is Faire Direct, which is when you take your direct URL and share it with a store. If they use that link to buy your products, there's 0% commission. So that's really the ideal way to go, is get a store onto Faire or send them your direct link so that they're shopping directly with you. And then there's no commission, which that's only happened to me on one order. But it's just something, it encourages you to keep pursuing your own leads outside of the people who just randomly find you on the site and then bringing them to Faire. But again, the 15%, it's a lot, and it is a lot to stomach, especially when part of the percentage for like payment processing, there's different tiers, and the lowest percentage of payment processing is a 60-day payment. So I have people place orders with me. I chose that one because I just hate losing money. But I have people place orders and then I don't see that money for 60 days from the fulfillment date. So that's tough too, especially going into holiday time when I need to be buying more supplies. I'm just sort of like waiting on these payouts. And again, it takes a lot of like planning and runway in terms of finances. So it just might not be an option for everybody, but it's definitely something to factor in because it's, like I said, the biggest con of working with Faire. Another con that may or may not matter to you that much, but it is trickier to vet who is buying your products. Now, when an order comes through, you don't have to accept the order. And there may be a few reasons for you to do that. You might have a competitor in a neighboring area and you have told that competitor that they won't have anyone, they'll have exclusivity, whatever. Faire does a little bit of that themselves where they offer exclusivity based on your zip code. So Faire manages that somewhat, but maybe you wanna be more aggressive with that. Or it might just not be a store that fits your brand. And that's a personal choice. I think it's a lot harder to say no to those things when you're a newer business. Obviously, I'm sure there's reasons to do it or not do it, but you do have the option to reject an order. Sometimes I do find though that like, even though I've gotten the information on the buyer, it's not always super clear what their store looks like, where their store is. I've had stores that I think are mainly online. I think you're supposed to have a brick and mortar, but I'm not sure about that. So yeah, there's some like gray area in terms of finding out more about that person. And you can message the people who buy from you and start a conversation, but if you're getting a ton of orders, it's gonna be difficult to do. So just something to consider, that you don't have nearly as much information going in on this person. And yeah, that may or may not be a big deal for you. And like I sort of touched on earlier, is that again, it is a challenge to always be adding new products, especially if you are a small maker of goods that maybe take a while to make or are one of a kind. Always adding new products in order to like stay relevant to the search results and all of that. That's a challenge. And it's, like I said, like can sometimes be a straight up bad business decision to just be adding a bunch of new products for the sake of staying relevant on Faire. So that's something, again, that is dependent on what kind of business you have and your production process. But that's definitely, I think, a con, is like the fact that you are rewarded for adding more products when ultimately that might be harmful to you. Makes kind of a conflict of interest, in my opinion. Overall, considering pros and cons, for me, it is still very much worth setting up an account with Faire. I have at least 7, maybe 8 now new clients, and I just started putting energy into this over the summer. It's currently the beginning of October. So absolutely worth it to me. And again, I think as I go into holiday season, I'll see more activity. Who knows what it'll be like during the slow times in retail, but for right now, I really think it's been worth my time, and I feel like the return I've gotten for the time investment that I've put in is absolutely worth it. So that considered, I am gonna just offer a few tips that I feel like put me at an advantage to like make the most out of this website and the setup of Faire. The first one I already touched on, and that is to continue to pursue your own relationships and use your Faire direct link. So research stores that you think are a good fit for your brand, send them an email or information or whatever. If it's in person, great, but give them that direct link and hopefully bring them to the site. You get rewarded for bringing new retailers to the site, and retailers get a reward for signing up. When I signed up as a buyer, I did not get that, but I did not sign up with someone's direct link. So that might be what it is. Like, they only get that benefit if they use your link to sign up. So just something to consider when you're promoting this. Find out the specific details. Sorry, I don't have them for you, but find out what exactly it is and then use that as a bargaining tool for getting them signed up for the site using your direct link, because that will ultimately benefit you. Also put your direct link in your social media profiles. Sort of goes without saying, but just another place to have that. Put it on your website, anywhere that you can have this link, so that even when you are not actively reaching out to people yourself, people can still find this direct link and hopefully you'll benefit from that. Another small thing that I've found, you do have to decide on like a lead time for shipping out an order, and you can decide this yourself. I try not to have it be too long because I think that is a deterrent for people, but I think mine is like 7 to 10 days. So when an order comes through and I accept it, you have to choose a ship date when you accept the order, and it gives you a suggested ship date based on what you've said your lead time is. I always push it to the very last day of that recommendation. And the reason I do that is a couple of reasons, actually. The first one is under promise, over deliver. I usually ship out orders before that date that I've told them it will go out. And so now they feel like, oh, okay, that's coming earlier than I thought. And it gives them a good impression of me as a business. So that's one reason. The other reason is that one of the sort of gold stars on Faire is qualifying as a top shop. It gives you like a badge in the search results, and it just adds some credibility to your business. There's a bunch of things that factor into whether or not you're a top shop, but one of those things is getting orders out on time. And so if you accept an order and think, oh, I can get this out in the next couple of days, so you pick a ship date a couple days from now and something goes wrong and you're late on that, it's gonna affect your potential to qualify for top shop, and it's just not worth it. So even if it feels like you absolutely don't need all that time, pick the farthest out date you can. And then my last tip is having an insert, like a little flyer or something. At the very least, if you can't afford a bunch of postcards, just like a print off that personalizes your products for this buyer, because that's the thing that Faire takes away in terms of like these relationships versus the relationships I've sought out on my own, is that it's lacking the sort of personal relationship, that rapport. And so when I package up an order, I put in their normal Faire packing slip, but I also include a postcard that on one side has a big picture of me smiling and says, thanks so much for your order. We're so excited to have Bushel products in your store. Let me know if there's anything you need. Just like very basic, but it's like a big picture of me happy, like, hey, here's the human that goes along with these products. And then on the flip side is like a grid of a bunch of my different product photos, because it's also a reminder that I might do more than whatever you ordered. You know, if somebody's just ordering shower steamers from me, I want them to be reminded of all the other products that I offer. So it's like a 1-2 punch, super easy. I just ordered them from Moo during one of their like promo sales, and they look really professional and lovely. And again, it's a reminder that like there's a person behind these products that you ordered. I think it helps people to feel like they are, again, supporting like an individual as opposed to just a company. That concludes my honest review of Faire. I think there are a lot of businesses that it is going to be a huge asset for, and other businesses where it is not the right fit. I think it's absolutely a reminder that when you are pricing your products, which I talked about in a previous video, you need to have the margins that allow for wholesale before you even consider pursuing this, because with that commission cut, it makes it even harder. So make sure your products are priced before you even consider any of this. It's worth it. It takes some effort up front, and it takes a little bit of effort to continue updating and being on top of and making sure that you're putting yourself in front of the right stores. But I'm enjoying it so far, and I will keep you posted if that changes. But I appreciate you watching this video. I hope it was helpful to you. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button. It allows me to reach other business owners and share this information with them. And if you want to keep getting updated for future videos, please hit the subscribe button, and I will see you next time.